Welcome to our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesday's reread. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. Right now, we are in the Murderbot Diaries.
Murderbot Diaries.
And we are covering Exit Strategy by Martha Wells. I believe the fourth in the series?
Fourth. Yeah.
The fourth book in the series. But before we get into that, Laura, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying?
So I got a book on NetGalley, Phaedra by Laura Shepperson. And this is a Greek retelling of Phaedra and Hippolytus, who their story in Greek mythology is ick to begin with. For those of you who do not know, it's all tied in with Phaedra's older sister, Ariadne, who is kind of in love with Theseus, and Theseus comes to Crete and battles the Minotaur, ends up slaying the Minotaur and getting the people who were offered up to Crete from Athens out of the labyrinth, which was made by Daedalus. And then he uses Ariadne's string to get out of the labyrinth with those people. And he tricks Ariadne to coming with him that night, fleeing. And Phaedra, the younger sister, obviously does not go, but then Theseus leaves Ariadne on an island where she is then discovered by Dionysus, the god, and he's most famously like the god of wine. And so Dionysus and Ariadne then become husband and wife, and Theseus moves on because he's like, oh, done with her, so I'm going to go back to Athens and become king. And he then becomes betrothed to Phaedra, the younger sister of Ariadne, who was kind of offered as like a mending of their two cities to kind of bring some peace. But Phaedra, in the story of her, in this Greek mythology story, Phaedra becomes obsessed with Theseus's son, Hippolytus, who Hippolytus is also problematic because he was the product of Theseus raping a Amazon woman. I'm sorry, I should have started all of this with trigger content because all of this is just gross. And so Phaedra is obsessed with Hippolytus in the story and supposedly ends up taking advantage of Hippolytus and then claiming that Hippolytus had assaulted her. And then Theseus comes and he is enraged and ends up killing Hippolytus, and Phaedra, in her guilt, kills herself for having lied about this. So this book is a retelling of that, and a very difficult thing to do because the source material is ick. Like I said, it's very ick. And this was kind of like marketed as a feminist retelling. And I don't know why it was marketed that way, because this is nearly an impossible story to make into like a empowering thing for women. I just and the author is a good writer, but this retelling ends up basically just kind of being a story where it's like portrayed in such a way that it probably would have happened during that time where Phaedra is actually just brutally assaulted and no one believes her.
Right.
And then deals with just immense depression, and it's all just so bad. And Hannah, it was a terrible thing to try and rewrite this. And then I also just think that the way that they marketed this book was so misguided, because it just was not what they were saying it was. The author is a fairly good writer. I mean, she does write in a way that you like stay engaged with the story, but as you're going along, you're just feeling like a weight on your shoulders. I don't know how else to describe it, where you're just like,
Right.
no. But this was just not a Greek story that needed to be retold. So many people right now are very obsessed with the story of Ariadne and Theseus because there's been several recent books released that are kind of like surrounding these characters,
right,
with like the Minotaur, and I am unsure why people are so obsessed with this particular like family, but
right,
it is what it is, and there are plenty of other Greek stories that probably could be retold in a better way. We hear a lot about like people wanting to do feminist retellings of Greek stories, but weirdly, you don't get much of like Artemis. And
right.
I find that so strange because Artemis is like the hunter and supposed to be like really powerful. Or why don't we get more of Athena? Like,
right. Well,
some of the goddesses that seem more powerful and that we would have a little more empowerment with.
So I kind of wonder if
But honestly, like Greek mythology is just so touchy anyways, because so many bad and gross things happen where even the women are doing terrible things to men. It's not always one way,
right,
the gods and goddesses are gods and goddesses in these stories, and they don't really care about the consequences of their actions on humans,
right.
because they're gods and goddesses. So they do a lot of bad things to humans, it seems, in Greek mythology. But some of these retellings, I don't know.
I think there's almost like, this is something that I can't really speak on. You've read a couple more like Greek retellings more than I have, at least. Do you think there's almost like a little bit of an obsession with like the trauma women
Definitely
suffered in history that people like? Because like the whole thing with like Athena is like, Athena is the huntress. Athena is also like often not going to like mess around with men. And
well,
I
that's
do
Artemis.
wonder, or Artemis. I'm so sorry, Athena.
Mm-hmm.
I messed that up. Sorry, I did mean Artemis. So I do wonder if it's just like Athena or Artemis, like there's almost like they need to have the trauma of the history to like be interested in the retelling. And I think that is incredibly problematic, especially when you get to like stories like Phaedra, where it's like, okay, that the way to find like a feminist retelling is not to silence the telling of like how a man was defiled and make him the defiler in these historical contexts. Like, I don't quite.
And that's what this book does. And that's why it's so just ick to read. The story was ick to begin with, and it's still ick in this retelling. And I think you're very right when you are saying, like, I think it's the trauma that people are connecting with, because it's almost like the same way that people, like, we've mentioned this so many times, that it's just a broken record, that people connect to true crime, especially women love Greek retellings. And it's just a weird connection to trauma that people need to stop being connected to this.
And like, here's the thing is like, you can, I don't want to say like you can't write about trauma, because I think like it's very important, but there's a weird, like, you can't, like, if you want to do a feminist retelling, why does it have to be told through the lens of trauma? Why can't it be told in other interesting ways?
Right.
Like, if you want to write about like trauma and overcoming and like how to do that, that's great. But like, even some of the retellings I've read, there is that certain, like, I don't know.
I mean, I really liked Circe.
Yeah.
There are definitely traumatic things that happen in that. However, it just, I don't know. I feel like the way that it's written, it just maybe in certain senses like holds more true to like the actual Greek mythology of it all, rather than this, which Phaedra was written almost from like the standpoint of, actually, this is probably what happened. And it's like, do we need to have that? I think we all probably know what happened, and
but also, like, I don't know. There's this weird thing of like, these are ancient like stories, so it's like, Why are we doing it for these like historical people? I don't know. It's so bizarre where it's like half of these
Mm-hmm.
tales are made up, half of these things. So like so yeah, you're right. In the context of like the world, the likelihood that a woman is violated is much higher than a man, that happening to a man. But like, why did you have to take one of the only stories that does deal with that? Like, I recently was
Mm-hmm.
talking about how like we don't talk about men involved, like men with active consent enough. Like consent is just not talked about in a healthy way where it's like, hey, both parties have to consent. There is this like, and as it should be, I'm not saying it shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be
Sure.
like focused on women, but I also don't think we talk enough about like, hey, you know that men have a right not to want to have sex too,
Right.
right? And
And
I
that would have been maybe an interesting way to write this story from like the point of
right,
view of Hippolytus instead of
right, where it's like,
Phaedra, where it's like turned around like actually no, she's the victim and he brutally
yeah,
assaulted her. Where it
like
would have been interesting if they like the author kept it similar to the
actual
most
retelling and like,
most common story that we know of and gave us some point of view of Hippolytus and how he had actually like dedicated himself to Artemis
mhm.
and celibacy and now has been yeah. I
Harmed.
just
Like, I think that that could have been a feminist retelling. Like, that is a
mhm,
feminist retelling to talk about men through
sure.
the lens of consent and men through the lens of like, what would it have meant historically for that to have happened to someone? How would they
Right.
have felt in that moment? How would he have dealt with the reaction? And it's almost this belief that like trauma can only be felt by women. And the only way to talk about it is through the
Yeah.
lens of like, hey, this historical like text that was never about her being harmed in that way. It just feels very
Hmm.
weird.
Right.
Um, as someone who did not read this book, but I'm
You
glad
know,
you read it and
I
I didn't.
I did not enjoy it very much. I gave it 2 stars just because like I finished it and
Right,
I think that the author is not a bad writer,
right,
but in terms of like enjoying it and wondering like does this story need to be told this way? It's a no for me. It's a
right.
no.
Yeah. What have
But
you been watching lately?
I watched The Mandalorian.
How was it? Your dive into Star Wars?
So The Mandalorian I had watched Andor, I loved Andor. I love The Mandalorian also, but the thing about The Mandalorian, so Jon Favreau is the one that is the creator writer for The Mandalorian, and you definitely get like more of his like cutesy
Marvel
feel
Universe vibes.
cutesy Marvel feel good vibes that he wants to put into it. And you know what? I think that's fine that we get different kinds of shows within this universe. I think that's totally fine. But I do think I at this moment in time prefer Andor, the TV show, to The Mandalorian. But The Mandalorian is definitely one that I really love, and I love how the relationship between the Mandalorian and Grogu is so adorable and they're very cute. I also just found myself the way that they play like the relationship between them, you get really attached to them, and I found myself being really attached to them and getting invested in the story, and the music is really cool the way that they tie it all in and everything. And they I think a lot of this show is fan service because they bring in just like so many characters that you had seen in like the Clone Wars and they bring them kind of all in together in this show and have them interact. So I think a lot of it is just like people are getting some of the wishes that they wanted in the Star Wars universe and seeing some of these characters interact in this show, which is great. But in terms of like a better storyline, and I think I am going to go for the Mandalore or the for Andor. The
Okay.
Mandalorian would be probably my second favorite
And I
after.
tell you that I'm so thankful that you were watching all these, mostly because I honestly, if you had told me yesterday, like, oh, I watched Andor, there is a 75% chance I would have assumed it was The Mandalorian and vice versa. Like, I don't think I
Sure.
knew the difference between all these TV series. So you've been helping me a lot. So
Oh, there
thank
you go.
you.
Yeah, I
Um,
am slowly becoming a Star Wars expert. because now I find myself like actually Googling Star Wars information to
Oh man,
learn more about it.
Laura.
I'm going into Reddit deep dives on Star Wars. So it's happening. I'm sucked into the fandom.
Laura is about to actually some people out there.
I mean,
Just you
I
wait.
can.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, I
actually,
would say that Mandalorian's really good though. I'm definitely excited for the third season. I think maybe just the point of me like saying this is that I just like Andor better. So
that's fair. I mean, I get. I do
and
like
not that it even matters that I like Andor better.
No, but I do like what you're saying about like not every show has to be the exact same tone. Like I think
Right. And
sometimes
that's
people get way too used to the like similar tone, like similar universe being the same tone. And I do like that you noticed that you were like, no, it doesn't have to be. That
I
could be
would say
what it
the
is.
Mandalorian is more of like a family show, if that
Okay.
makes sense, where you still have all the action and everything, but the characters, there's a lot more cute moments, cutesy moments. You have obviously the music and the friendships and things like that that you get in the Mandalorian that you don't really get so much of in Andor. Andor is much
Okay.
more serious.
But the
So
friends we made along the way.
the friends we made along the way.
Well,
But
that's
yeah, it's
exciting.
a good show. I
Oh,
like it.
oh,
So
good. And I didn't mean to ask, have you read any other books that you wanted to talk about? I realized I only let you talk about a book that was very dicey, and I
you know
should
what?
give you the
I'll leave
opportunity.
it at that one for now.
Okay, for
So Hannah, what have you
now.
been reading and watching?
For watching, okay, can I just Laura and I talk about this. It has to come up every 6 months or the podcast can be no more. Can I talk
Mhm.
about how funny New Girl is?
Yeah, of
It's
course.
currently my go to sleep show, and I'm rewatching like later seasons, so like the Reagan era, if you will.
That's my least favorite era.
It's my least favorite era, but there were some like great jokes. So there's an episode where Nick goes to like pick up Cece's mother, and he picks up a
Mhm.
woman who does not speak English and is not
Mhm.
Cece's mother. And Cece is Indian. And so this woman's just like traveling around with him, thinking she got kidnapped. And at the
Mhm.
end of the episode, Nick is rifling through her purse, trying to find her identification, like trying to find where to take this lady. And he goes, "Is this pepper spray? Why didn't you use this on me?" And I've never laughed harder at like a line reading because like the way he says it is just so like, oh my gosh, I should have been pepper spray. Like, and everyone uses the meme of his like, stop yelling at me or I'm gonna fall in love with you. Or yeah, or I'm gonna fall in love with you. And I'm like, oh no, the line 2 lines ago was just a master class in humor because that was so funny. I died.
His delivery, the actor that plays Nick, why can't I remember his name at the moment?
Jake Johnson.
Johnson. Yes, he does such a great job with that role, and his
So
delivery
good.
is excellent.
He's so funny. I just loved it so much.
I will say though that you don't see those actors enough in other
That's
shows,
true. I mean, he
and
was
I really
on
think
that
that they're
one show that you
talented.
liked. He was on that one show that you liked that got canceled. The Minx or the Mink?
Oh, I didn't watch it.
Oh, I thought you had watched it and
No,
then it
I
got
didn't watch that one. I was excited
okay.
for it and then I never watched it. Oops.
Oh, okay. Well, oopsies. So part of it is your fault. And I will say Hannah Simone, who plays Cece, is on a new Gina
Yes, she's going to be in
Rodriguez
a
show.
new show with Lauren Ash
Oh,
from Superstore.
oh yeah, yeah. And I recognize Gina Rodriguez, and Gina Rodriguez is
Jane the Virgin.
Jane the Virgin, but she's a little controversial, so I hadn't decided if I was going to watch it or not. But I
Okay.
probably will end up watching it. But yeah, so I've been rewatching New Girl at night, and it just tickles my fancy so hard. I love that show so much. It's just like the relationship between Nick and Schmidt, and even like Nick and Winston. Like I recently saw a TikTok that was like, New Girl is about like men who are uncomfortable in their own like selves, and then through like living together with a female roommate come to a closer bond and understanding with each other. And I was like, well, that's really sweet. That's really sweet. I would argue that Nick and Schmidt are very close from the start. It's just Nick becomes more comfortable with it.
Sure.
Schmidt is always comfortable with it. But so I've been watching that and not much else in that sphere. But for reading, I did Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America by Ijeoma Oluo.
How was that?
So I think that the book was, for me, It was interesting when it was interesting. And I will say I love Ijoma Oluo because she makes me question parts of myself. And I do think if you're going to grow, you have to ask yourself very hard questions about
Right.
like white-centered history or how you center yourself in storylines or how you deal with like being criticized because she is like an activist writer. So she does not pull punches. And I think when those are the moments that like maybe question myself, they're great. I will say this was a very interesting style book because the first chapter is kind of how they sold the book, which I think did the book a disservice. Like it was like it's looking at white men throughout history and deconstructing why they weren't that special in the first place.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, this will be like a very interesting take. And that's kind of how it was sold on like podcasts and everything.
Yeah.
And I would say that that's not what this book was.
Okay.
The first chapter is kind of, it opens with Buffalo Bill as the start about like how white supremacy can change the story and how we all talk about like Buffalo Bill in a very specific way. But if you look at him later in life, like we don't even know his real name. We don't know that he later like regretted a lot of the like pomp and circumstance he used to like push that Native Indians scalped people. Because that's not what they were doing. And he had like a lot of regret for the way white people handled like pretty much like conservation and everything of the land. And he just didn't like what a lot of white America did. And we never talk about those parts of him. And that was kind of what I was expecting for the rest of the book. But then it kind of just became, it was a lot more mix of like reflections on race with some history layered in.
Okay.
But a big problem with the book, it's not the book itself. Like I struggle to talk about it because I don't think it's a bad book necessarily, but I think the theme of it was sold as like, this is a very like, let's look at the dangers of white men in history. But also Aluo is not someone who centers whiteness in her stories. And so when she kept saying that that was her thesis, it felt a little flat because then she didn't talk about the history. She kind of did a lot more of like reflection of Black spaces and everything, which is not a bad thing by any means. It just left me like confused while I listened to it via audio, and I was just kind of confused by like at the end of the book, she's like, oh, she talks about a woman who met with her whose father was a school shooter. And she talks about like meeting with the woman and how the woman was very lovely and very kind and like talking to her the entire time and talking about how like her dad ended up only shooting one person, even though he had like gone in to shoot everyone. So it's like, oh, it's in a moment of like disassociation and everything. And Aluo was like, and this woman was wonderful, but like, if you actually look at the history of this man, like he had a long history of violence. He was like pushed out of the military. He did this, he did this, he did this. And it's like, so of course, like, I'm not trying to disrespect his family, but like, that's why I wrote this book. And I'm like, but you didn't really write about white men. Like it felt a little weird when the start and the finish was very like centered on that. But then the middle
and
was
then
much
the middle
more,
was not that.
Yeah, it was not quite that. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. It was almost like I wish her publisher hadn't pushed that narrative then and like pushed her more towards like, hey, why don't we do an overarching history of like race in America? Because like I totally get where it's like, yeah, white maleness should not be centered in the history of America. But if you're writing a book that you're saying is about that and then it's not about that, it is a little strange, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I think that you just like saying that story about Buffalo Bill briefly, I'm like, oh, that would be interesting to hear about and more stories like that throughout. But yeah, when it kind of goes off in another direction that you're not expecting, it's
right?
Like, oh, darn it.
I kind of talked about like it was like, and sometimes it just felt a little like less research, more reflection. Which also I was like, maybe I'm not used to this type of history book because again, white men are usually the ones who write history books, so maybe it's just like. Maybe I'm just like expecting a certain thing and not getting it. And then there's like a little disassociation for me. But like at one point she's talking about like Bernie Bros and like how they reacted to people in Black spaces. And she used a couple of Bernie quotes, but then there were a couple of people who were fans of Bernie on Goodreads. So like I will caveat it with that. So they were like, they got their hackles rised up, but she almost like didn't tell the full story of his quotes. And didn't like quite go hard enough in ways that I thought she could have gone, which is like
Okay.
She wanted to blame Bernie for being silent instead of like blaming the overarching like societal issues of how we make it so people have to water down their own views to be palatable to the majority. And it was just interesting. Like I have a lot of similar like critiques for certain people who went for Bernie, you know, and not to get too political on this podcast to get people's hackles raised, but like there are bad voters on both sides or whatever. But it was very interesting and very weird with some of the ways she like decided to tell the story. And I wish like it just felt like she wanted to write more of a reflection book, but when you're writing about a historical argument book, it's just a little bit strange.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that.
But on the other side of things, I also I've been doing a lot of audiobooks while I travel and while I'm trying to make my way through A Day of Fallen Night. So just giving it a little bit of break from the 800 pages.
Sure.
Like, wonderful book that I'm enjoying very much, but sometimes it gets to be a lot. I read Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson.
Oh, yeah. How was that? That's on my TBR.
I really liked that book so much. It was so good as an audiobook, honestly. Like,
okay, maybe I'll do it on audio.
It was really good for an audiobook. Like, I really enjoyed it. So it's about two like siblings who are estranged, and their mother just passed away. She has told them her entire life that she and their father are orphans from a Caribbean island. And then it kind of goes into this like she makes them both sit down together and listen to this tale about this girl growing up in the Caribbean who is very similar to her, and mysteries abound about what happened to this woman. And it's really wonderful. Like, it's so great to see the siblings. I felt very connected to the younger sister who's like kind of lost in finding herself. But like her older brother is also very hurt and very headstrong in his own way. And it was interesting to like see like themes of like traditionalism, like respect for parents. And it was a very humanizing look. Like, this book was such a humanizing look at like family dynamics and the hurt that can happen on both sides, even if it's unintentional. So there is a moment where you find out like the daughter is estranged from the family, and you get to see both sides of things, where it was like, well, in the moment, we just needed more time. And then we got mad at you that you couldn't give it to us. And on her end, it's like, well, I was hurt because I was coming to you guys incredibly vulnerable, and you guys walked away from me and you rejected me. So then I had to protect myself.
Right.
And there are moments in this book where like you get to see all sides of like hurt and frustration. And there were some moments where I was so shocked where like in like the backstory, like someone kind of moves away and you could see where a lot of people might demonize that person, but like the people around her were like, absolutely not, she needed to get out, we understand. And I was like, that's human and like awesome. And it was just I really enjoyed reading this book. I like couldn't stop listening in moments when I was supposed to be reading Murderbot. But I really loved Black Cake. And like it's all surrounding like this like Black Cake is like a Caribbean delicacy. They talk about like the history of food, and the way it's told is like, I will say it jumps around a lot, but I thought it was still very effective as an audiobook because like it changes and it shifts to like the history of Black Cake and the history of a storm and the history of this and this and this. And it all just like weaves in such an intricate and beautiful way that I adored this novel. I thought it was really great.
That's awesome. Sounds really good.
It was really good. And
I also love when books incorporate like other pieces of the culture, like the food and all of these things in there. And you mentioned the weather too. Like that's really neat.
I just thought it was so effectively done. It was so good. And like, it kept you on your seat and like, you knew what was going to be happening, but at the same time you were like, oh, I can't wait to see how it happens. Like, this is going to be so great. So yeah, highly recommend that book to anyone looking to add, and great for audio.
Can't wait to read it.
So, but with that, Laura, should we dive into exit strategy?
Let's get to our exit strategy. Martha Wells loves to work in the book title.
Yeah, I was reading this book last night in bed and I go, hey, that's the name of the book.
Oh, Martha, love you so much.
Strategy. Well, awkwardly working
It's
in
been like
the movie title.
the last three, I think. This one, the one before that. So 2, 3, and 4, I think,
Oh.
have all worked in the book title.
I forget when book 3 did it, but I believe you.
Because it was like fear is an artificial condition. And then I think that when Murderbot was talking about being rogue, I think it's mentioned that it has a rogue protocol at one point.
Oh, okay. And I mean, all systems red, who knows? Okay.
I think that's the only one that I don't remember all systems red like being in the book.
Yeah, this is interesting. She does love to work in a movie title in her books. I wonder if it's just like something fun.
I mean, I think that's kind of a fun writing strategy though, because these are short books. So these are novellas. So maybe it's like something that she comes up with the title, and then maybe that's a writing strategy that she comes up with the title and then works around that to create the story.
I wonder.
That could be a thing.
That could be a thing.
Or maybe she just picks out like a favorite line from the book after she's written it and is like, it's gonna be that.
It's gotta be that. It's gonna be big. But in this book, we start off with Murderbot going back to the Have-Ratton station. And a bunch of humans tried to kill it. It goes considering
Murderbot
how much
is so snarky in this book. I love it.
Okay, I did want to talk about, like, we'll talk about this next week, but the language that Murderbot uses in this book, Murderbot is becoming more emotive in the way it speaks. Like, it's saying things that it's only said to us out loud more. And I find that hilarious, like, just with the way it's beginning to open up. And we'll get there,
but Murderbot interacting with a character that we had seen before, Murderbot has no more patience.
I don't like you. I know. So, yes, these books also have the best opening liners. When I got back to Have-Ratton Station, a bunch of humans tried to kill me. Considering how much I've been thinking of killing a bunch of humans, it was only fair. And it talks about
to give a little more context, though, Murderbot, you feel bad about it, and you're trying to figure out why you killed a bunch of humans.
That's fair. But also it just talks about how it's so over humans all the time, but then like immediately runs to one and it's like, let me help you. So it talks about how it's writing on ship. Ship is pretty straightforward. It's not like art.
Yeah, it's not as advanced as art, but it's just a bot pilot. So
and it kind of so it's writing on ship. It's kind of all alone with like the bot pilots and everything. And it goes, I knew ship wouldn't betray me intentionally, but the chance of it doing so unintentionally was resting at a solid 84%. But as Murderbot is getting close to the ship, this is the one that Wilkin and Girth were on. So as it gets closer to this station, it realizes like there's a bunch of people waiting for it at the docking station. And Murderbot's like, oh, thank God I saved that thing that'll get me outside the doors. And so it escapes before it like fully docks in. It kind of just walks around. Oh,
it had the evac suit, right? That was what you're talking about. Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're totally fine. And it also talks about like watching an episode of TV that it found incredibly boring. I like endless historical family drama series, but in real life, ghosts are way more annoying. As it goes to hunt down Dr. Mensa.
Digging through its own ghosts.
Yes, digging through its own ghosts. But Murderbot is like worried that they're going after it because of what happened last book in Milu.
Which it's fair.
Like, yeah, and it's like usually it doesn't get out that fast, so I don't see that happening. But once it gets on the ship, it kind of sees people milling around, and it's like, oh no, that was definitely what was happening. They definitely knew. So it's kind of trying to look for a way to get transported. And it's pinging the ship. It pinged back, so it kind of Murderbot kept all of its security codes because no one thought to wipe them from its system. So it's just kind of like, hey, here's my security code. Can I come on? And they're always like, oh yeah, totally. Come right on.
Which no one ever checks that is baffling.
Right. I'm always like, is Murderbot just the best? Or like, are all like bots who just like, if they're underneath their governor modules, they're like, dude, I would totally be getting into that if they just let me.
Right.
I wonder about it. it talks about how it's like trying to get on a ship, but it's also really paranoid that since like some people were looking for it, that they're going to be looking on other empty ships. And Murderbot's like, I definitely overthink things, but like that's what keeps me safe. And so
it's like the upside is paranoid attention to detail. The downside, paranoid attention to detail.
And so it also like has these weapon systems. So Murderbot's also getting really good at like getting into systems and deleting like all memory of its existence, of it being in a room. And it's also like getting bypassed for all the weapons it's holding, because it's holding more and more weapons, because it has like Wilkin and Girth's weapons. And it's like, I'm just carrying them around in a bag over here. And then it does overhear them talking about a sec unit that might have been on board, and it's like, oh yeah, this was about me.
Yep.
And it says the people who are talking about it was like, oh, it has a controller on board, and they're like, no, that's why they call them rogue. And I'm like,
right,
that's amazing.
And that's when Murderbot is like, oh yeah, this is about me.
So it talks like, it kind of gives us the backstory about like art and all the friends it's made along the way, and it's also talks Milu, or no, Mickey talks about Mickey.
The planet Milu.
Oh, yeah, it reminds us of what happened on planet Milu, about the fact that like Murderbot like stopped it from falling into a planet or a comet, or I forget, but
it stopped it from collapsing on itself, basically, from being like nothing.
Which was what this Grey Chris Corporation was trying to get it to happen, so that they didn't see that like instead of terraforming, they were getting off like what's it called? My mind is blanking.
It was a illegal alien remnant mining platform.
That's what it was.
So yeah, they were trying to cover that up, that they were mining illegal alien parts. So
right.
That's why they're trying to basically make the place disappear.
And Murderbot had all that information that it took from two of Grey Chris's contract killers, who were sent to Milu, and they apparently kept like these blackmail chips. And Murderbot was like, these will come in handy later. And so Murderbot decides to kind of like dress itself in a way that they are expecting. So it goes to a station mall, and it's like, this is a horrifying experience. I hate every single minute of this.
Me at any mall.
And it was like, and then it buys some clothes, like it looks through it, and it likes that it gets to be alone in a facility. And it realizes that it actually likes the new clothes, and it like didn't know that it could feel that way.
This is me shopping though, like to a T, because it literally picks out an outfit that's very similar to what it had been wearing already. And it's like, oh, I really like this. And it's like, wait a minute, this is actually pretty similar.
Exactly what I own.
And I'm like, that's so me, because I go shopping and I'm like, oh, I like this or I like that. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I have almost this identical outfit at home, just like slightly different.
I was shopping because I had like a 40% off coupon today, and I was like, "Ooh, that's cute." And I'm like, I own it. I was like, "Ooh, that's cute." And I'm like, I own that. It wasn't exactly the same thing, but it was very similar. So Murderbot is still us. But then it also notes that this could be that it likes the clothes because it got to pick them out itself.
But it got to pick them itself. It got a knapsack too.
Yes.
It loves pockets. So.
It loves pockets. Same machine, same.
And Murderbot is our champion because Murderbot recycles the other clothes.
I know. And so it is planning to go see Dr. Mensa. Maybe it hasn't decided if it's going to go see her or if it's just going to drop off the information and run away quickly. When it finds out that Dr. Mensa has been accused of Grey Chris of corporate espionage by Grey Chris. And Murderbot is like, how did this happen? Like, she definitely didn't do that. She is a planetary leader from a non-corporate political entity. Like, of course she didn't do corporate espionage. And it says
even not even the cheap, stupid, half-ass bond company that had owned me could F that up.
Right. And then it realizes that like Mensa was taken to Tran Roland Haifa involuntarily to like be, and they were trying to get her to a location where they could take her by saying she was guilty of corporate espionage.
Right.
And it's like, what made Grey Chris panic so much? And then it's like, oh shit.
Me.
It was me.
I did this. Oops.
It's me. Hi,
Hi,
I'm the problem. It's me.
It's me.
Um,
I can't tell you how often I sing that now, just like randomly.
so
If
many
I do
times.
something, I'm just like, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Like, oh, Taylor
But
Swift.
I know. And so it gets on a ship to go after Dr. Bentha, and it
Mhm.
realizes it's like pretending to be a human off and on. But this was the first time it has something on it that actually identifies it as a human, and
Yeah,
it
because it
still
has an
doesn't like
ID.
it.
It has an ID marker, and it's like John or something.
Yes. And so it gets into a cabin where it orders food to dump down the drain because it's like, well, something has to go down.
Well,
Uh,
it has like a storage cabinet, and it's like, I'll put that in there, and then I can get rid of it later. I'm like, ew, gross.
no, it talks about why it doesn't like to do stuff like that. Like it's like I could chew if I want to, but then it like pretty much just falls down this weird storage
Mhm.
cabinet that I have to clean out later, and it's really
Okay.
disgusting. And so it
Okay.
talks about how it orders meals while it's on the ship for the sole purpose of dumping it down like the toilet pretty much to convince
Okay.
them that it's eating it.
I
And it's like,
misread
and I
that then.
ordered the meals because it does say later on, like, I can chew on stuff if it's necessary. And then for some reason, I had the idiotic view of a cartoon character just putting an apple into its mouth and it dropping down. And then I was like, no, Hannah, it has to masticate that. It's like
Mhm.
chewed food. Sorry, that was gross, but
No, I get what you're saying because I was just like thinking that it was like eating it and then it was just like getting stuck in this compartment and just like staying there and not going anywhere, just like going bad. I'm like, ew, don't like that.
No, it was dumping it down the toilet. But it talks about like how Grey Chris probably thinks Dr. Mensa sent Murderbot after the
Mhm.
information, and that's why they have her. And it says that it gets really stressed, so it starts watching TV shows. It talks about like looking through the history of like sec units and everything in one of the television shows. And it talks about like how they used to not use cloned human parts, but actual human parts from humans who had catastrophic injuries or illnesses that had decided to have their parts used for what they called
Mhm.
augmented rovers. And it's like, who wants to bet that that wasn't exactly voluntary?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, awesome, great backstory that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, and then it switches over to like a musical comedy. It's like, yeah, I don't really like that. And having
Yeah,
a little
this is.
trouble thinking that this is exactly what happened. So I guess I'll watch a musical comedy.
I mean, hey, who doesn't just turn on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend to make themselves
I
feel
mean,
better?
me.
The
Hi,
way
I'm the problem. It's me.
the way I also constantly sing, but I could if I wanted to.
I love that one.
I love that one so much. I always sing it, just like at random moments. I'll be like, I could do that. Or I won't do that, but I could if I wanted to. I really could care, but I don't.
But I could, but my favorite is still you ruined everything, you stupid bitch.
You ruined
You
everything.
ruined everything. That's the best one.
You know what is also another favorite of mine that I quote? After everything I've done for you that you didn't ask for.
I also love that one.
Greg's not
Honestly,
the only
it's
one
also
you're
good.
screwing. And I suggested you be a bridesmaid.
So good.
Such a good show. But so yes, it turns on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and it listens about ruining everything, you stupid bitch. And Murderbot really feels seen by that song. I don't know why. But so it keeps watching media and it tries to prepare, and it realizes that the company that it worked for, Palisade, has a large office on that ring. And it's like, oh, I bet like Mensa went there for safety, but Palisade works for both of the both for Grey Chris and Preservation Ox.
It's like probably
so
has contracts with both of them. Oops.
And they're probably working against each other. And so Murderbot decides to kind of get rid of the clips that it got from Wilkin and Girth and sends them to Mensa's family. And I'm like, part of me was like, I wouldn't trust just sending it in the mail. That sounds dangerous to these random people.
And
but okay.
Also, yeah, when you say random people, I wondered this too, because I was like, what will they do with this? Like, do they know any of this? Like, are they just gonna be like, oh, okay, thank you. What is this about? Like, who do we get a hold of?
I mean, she is like the president of that planet, so I'm sure they're like, well, this seems important. Like, I go back to, I once had someone once shipped their cell phone to one of the judges I was working for. So, you know, things happen.
Okay.
They got yelled
Maybe
at.
Murderbot's onto something.
The judge didn't look in it though. He just called security.
Yeah.
I
mean, that seems more right.
Right. I know. So they may just call security and the security will look into it. But Murderbot's letter also is like, hello, I am an unidentified person. Please look inside this.
So great.
And so Murderbot sees that I believe who's making the speech?
Well, it was Bardwaj.
Dr. Bardwaj, who was like, don't worry, we are currently complying. And Murderbot is like, come on, that's not a real thing. They just want Mensa, like she's being held by Grey Chris.
They want money.
Like they want money, yeah. And it sounds they find out that there's no statement by Deltfall, whose survey team Grey Chris had slaughtered. So it's just like Grey Chris really needs money because Murderbot ruined like the Milu suit they had, and like all the money that they've been using, they're kind of hemorrhaging it to cover up all their tracks. So Murderbot's like, they have got to be like incredibly motivated to get this all done. So they get off at Tran Roland Haifa, and it like starts looking for anyone who can help, because it realizes that it like pings the company's ship, and it finds out that the people who are there to help Dr. Mensa are all off the security ship. And so Murderbot's like, oh, well, that's more to worry about. That sounds great. So it keeps watching Sanctuary Moon just to make it feel a little bit better.
Which so relatable to just like have your comfort show on in the background while you're doing anything.
I know, right? And Murderbot says that it's not too worried about the sec units because it like has a slightly different look nowadays, and it has more hair on it, so it's harder to detect that it is not human.
I was gonna say it even has like a thing beyond just like looking slightly different, being like a slightly different height. Isn't it something that art did to like make it not be recognized as a sec unit if they were to do a scan?
Yeah, I think so. And like Murderbot's getting better about hiding its scanning to make sure it doesn't answer pings and everything. So it kind of walks around. It's looking for the Mensa's crew pretty much, and it ends up going to a hotel where it thinks that they will be, and getting a room and falling in love with the giant screen TV. And it knows that there's security people watching, so it's like, okay, they have to be here. So it also gets really ticked off at the privacy at the hotel. It's like, I can't tap into all of the security. Are you effing kidding me? What am I supposed to do? And it talks about how the humans in the big screen TV are almost humans, are actually human size in long shots, which is like so much better than anything it's ever seen. And it gets really frustrating. I just love
the obsession with the TV.
I know. And so it like talks about getting itself out of all the security systems, and then it sees Rathi. Oh wait, no, it doesn't see Rathi. It talks about no, it does. I'm sorry.
It sees Rathi.
Yeah, caught an image of Rathi in the corner walking towards a pod junction, but it also talks about how the hotels like only lead you to where your room should be. So it's like, oh, this is so hard to infiltrate them. But it also sees Garathan and Pinley. If we remember, Garathan was the augmented human who hated Murderbot in the last book,
Murderbot
or in the first book.
Mutual in that hatred.
Yes, very much. And Murderbot is worried that them being out and about is a trap by Grey Chris to catch Murderbot.
Which, fair.
I know. And then it's like another possibility is like they're here to lure me in exchange for Mensa's release. So Murderbot's like, I don't trust these people.
It's such like a strange dynamic because it's like Murderbot should be concerned, but at times you're like, Murderbot, the world doesn't revolve around you. Maybe they aren't always like, where is this sec unit? So I go back and forth where I'm like, yes, Murderbot should be concerned, but then at times I'm like, is Murderbot overthinking this slightly too much? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, Murderbot's worries seem to be founded quite often, but also like these people love it so much that it's like Murderbot, no. But anyway, 3 of them leave the room and head towards the pod junction. So Murderbot goes after them and like redirects the people who were following them because everyone's too self-reliant on the controllers to get them where they need to go. Right. And it goes and it sees Grothin and Rothy sit down, but Pinley goes inside. So Murderbot goes after her because like I don't want to talk to Grothin.
It's like I do not want to talk to Grothin. Rothy's okay, but
yeah. And so it also talks about just like watching them a little bit to see if they have weapons. And it talks about how there are different kiosks with lots of banks and security companies, not Palisade, who catered only to corporate clients. And it goes up to Pinley and it's like,
hi, it's me.
Hi. And she barely glanced at it, but then took another look, frowns, and it's like, Murderbot goes, we met on Port Free Commerce. I was the one in the transport box.
So great.
And it gets her into a transit bubble to kind of keep everything quiet. And Pinley's like pissed because she's like, you left. And it's like, it said I could learn to do anything I wanted. I learned to leave. And they're kind of frustrated that Murderbot never wanted to talk to them about it. But then
and the way that Pinley reacts, I do kind of like this interaction because you kind of just are of the impression that Murderbot has just given us, you know, that, oh, they probably don't care. Like, I was just a pet bot to them. And the way that Pinley reacts and is like, how dare you? You left. And also that message, yeah, we knew we really screwed up. So thanks a lot for rubbing that in. Yeah. So I did kind of appreciate that reaction from Pinley where it's like, okay, well, they do actually care about the whole situation.
But it was also like, yeah, we knew we messed up at realizing you weren't a human. Like, and I was like, yeah, Murderbot was just confused. And so she's just kind of like talking to Murderbot, and Murderbot is having overwhelming emotions. And it's like, and she's like, where did you go? And she was like, well, if I was a free agent, I work for myself. So I worked for myself. And Pinley asks what Murderbot hired itself to do. And it's like, oh, I kind of like the sound of that. And then
I like that too. I kind of want to use that. I hired myself to do this.
I did like that. And it was, but then it's like, but then I saw that Mensa was missing. And like, did they trick her into coming here? Was she abducted? What happened? And it's like, you were just, Finley is like, were you really just sitting around watching that serial? And it's like, oh, I've been wandering around doing a lot of that. So they're so cute. But Murderbot said that it's there to help. And it says that, like, I pulled a status report from I love this because Pinley's like, why are you even here? Why should I trust you? And it's like, well, you're not the greatest at this. So that's why.
Oh, so funny.
And she goes, I forgot what an asshole you are. They're so amazing. And so they talk about how they are supposed to be meeting with Deltfall representatives and how things have like kind of gone haywire after that. And then Grey Chris sent a demand that Preservation drop the suit against them and make a public announcement to that effect. They've done that, and now they're here to negotiate a ransom back for Dr. Mensa. It says that Grey Chris must need the money, but the company is not like giving too much support other than refusing to let Grey Chris dock. And Mensa has an interface, but it is being like it's cut off while she's being held somewhere.
Right.
And so it says that they don't have a ton of money to raise the ransom, and it's like and Murderbot's like, well, the company is probably helping both sides. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
right.
your best
Like,
option
they're
is
playing a double game.
yeah, and it's like your best option is to pour in a ton of money. And Pinley's like, well, I'm glad you're back, I guess. So the four of them all get together again, and the gang's back together again.
Gang's all here.
And Rothie is like, you look great. What you been doing?
I've been changing all of my looks.
And I hate every part of it. I really like my jacket, but that's about it.
I'm shorter and I grew my hair out slightly.
And so it's like uncomfortable with the lack of cameras all around them. It wants to be able to like watch everything. And they are talking about like where they're holding Dr. Mensa, how to get her out, and how like you have to be careful entering Grey Chris corporate jurisdiction so that they're not put into danger. And like Rothie is still like, oh yeah, totally. The company will definitely help us. And Murderbot is like, no, they won't. Like, come on. Like, the ransom Grey Chris asks for Dr. Mensa's return will probably go straight to the company as part of the payoff to get rid of you guys. And Rothie is like, what? And Findlay is like, oh, that's what the diplomatic corps said. And Rothie's like, you didn't tell us that. And Grothan's like, I knew it. And Murderbot looks at Grothan and it goes, I mean, I suspected it. But Pidley said she was trying to get them all off before Grey Chris managed to negotiate the payoff. And Murderbot points out that Grey Chris probably can't afford the payoff right now, so it really needs the money. And it's probably freaking out.
And they're trying to get everything kind of wrapped up before people find out about Milu.
Yes, exactly. And so they're all like, well, Murderbot, could you come in and save the day? And Murderbot's like, well, we need a way to get her out of here. Like, what do we do? So they decide to lie about having all the money in order to like get her to at least get out of there to like start coming towards the ship. So then Murderbot can go run after them.
And also, I just like love how naive Rothie is about this, because she's like, how much do they know about our finances? Are they going to know we're lying? And Pinley's like, well, we don't have to like show them our credit card, or not credit card, but their whatever their bank card, basically
the currency card. They call
we don't have to show them our currency card.
We just need to fake some assets. And Grothan's like, you can take Mensa away no matter how many guards. And Murderbot's like, duh. And they're like, are you gonna kill them? And Murderbot's like, come on, guys. Like,
I mean, maybe.
And Grothan's like, you feel like you're qualified to make that call? And Murderbot's like, well, I am a security expert. You guys got attacked by angry fauna. I've extracted living clients from situations that were less than 9% survivable. I'm more than qualified to make that call. And Grothan is like, oh, this is crazy. Like, and Murderbot is like, Grothan goes, I'm going to wait in the lobby until you guys decide what to do. And they all agree. And Murderbot goes, well, I'm going to the lobby anyways.
Right.
It talks about how it's pretty much sulking. And the fact that it's like, it kind of contemplates on the fact that it started carrying around stuff more, how they seem like humans carry around a lot of stuff, but now it has like some kind of existence.
Right, like bags and...
Exactly. So they get the Grey Chris contact to come meet them, and they show it the person like their assets in order to get Mensa. But the guy's like, I know how to read assets, and I know the difference between assets and cash, you idiots. So it goes to set, it says like, oh, well, we had Dr. Mensa coming, but now we're going to stop it now that we know that you don't have the money. And Murderbot is able to stop the like ping going to them to tell them to stop getting Mensa, like taking Mensa back to the ship.
Right. So they continue to bring Mensa then.
Right. And so like at first everything kind of goes to shit. And I think at once like Murderbot is like, maybe this isn't such a terrible plan, was looking into, of course this is a terrible plan, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I died. I was laughing so hard. And so the guy almost tries to attack them, and Murderbot stops him, and Pinley stops Murderbot from like killing the person, and like the person is like trying, like dehumanizes the sec unit. And Pinley is like, no, this is a person. It's an angry person who wants you to answer the question. Are you bringing Mensa here?
Right.
And so Pinley's definitely on Murderbot's side, but also like, Murderbot, please don't kill anyone right now. Come on. And they accidentally expose that like you buy a sec unit and send it to Milu to expose an essential Grey Chris asset operation. And they're all like, no, we didn't. What are they talking about? And Murderbot's like, I know.
Murderbot's like, whoops, that could be me. Also, I just found the plan thing you were talking about. It had discarded plan, actually not all that terrible, and shifted to plan approaching terrible.
Yes, I loved that so much. I read that out loud to my boyfriend. I was like, wait, I have to read this next line to you.
So funny.
So they realize that Grey Chris is coming, and they're like less than 2 minutes out. And so Murderbot says that it shuts its risk module down, assessment module down, because it doesn't want to hear it. And it sends the three out to go get Dr. Mensa. And they are supposed to go and meet them on like a hotel transit station area. And Murderbot like goes after them, and it sees that there's a sec unit in there, but it doesn't first identify Murderbot. And so it thinks about hacking it, but it notes that it's never hacked a sec unit. And it doesn't want to fail. So it ends up pinging Dr. Mensa's feed, and it goes, hi, Dr. Mensa, it's me. And
it's Murderbot.
And it notes that like she notices who it is, and she asks for its name, and it says that it's Murderbot. And it knows that like only the people from Preservation Aux team knows Murderbot's actual name. So that's really nice. And Mensa was worried that it got captured.
Which is so sweet. And I know that there's like all these moments where like the crew is just like kind of like grouchy and mad towards Murderbot. But I do think that all of it like stems back to just a place of caring for Murderbot, which is why I just love the interaction so much.
I love it so much. They're so cute with Murderbot. And Murderbot's like, I came to help you. I have the 3 people down there, but like, it's going to be dangerous. And it asks her if it can proceed. And it's like, it was easier to be formal about this. And so, but Mensa doesn't even pause. And she's like, yes. And so it tells her to duck when it says so. And it gets out, and it immediately like shoots everyone down after it gets her to go down, and it starts running with Dr. Mensa down the station platforms, but like carefully. And at one point it holds Dr. Mensa's hand to like make them look less innocuous.
Which is so sweet. Oh,
I know. It says the platform camera showed I was doing pretty well looking casual. It surprised me too. And Dr. Mensa's doing a good job of like keeping control. And it notes that Grey Chris paid off the station to keep the company out. So the other 3 came anyway, and they're headed towards the station where the 3 will be. But Murderbot realizes that they know where the 2 of them are. And so they start running down the platform. But these sec units come in and they drop down the entire security system. And Murderbot is like fearing for Mensa's life, and it doesn't want anything to happen to her. As a drone squad comes in, and at one point Mensa's like, I'm really glad to see you.
Murderbot says, you can hug me if you need to.
No. And like Murderbot ups its temperature to like make sure that like it can be there for her. It's so nice. She admits that she knows that it was Murderbot in the terraforming facility, and it was like Sorry.
It says it was an accident.
Oh,
She's like,
yeah.
what part was an accident? And Murderbot says, most of the parts.
And it goes, I impersonated my client, my imaginary client that I impersonated. So it kind of tells her like everything that it did. She asks about it like killing all the combat bots. And I do think I've left out a part where Murderbot told Garothan everything that it did. Like it sent Garothan a video imagery of everything that it had gone through. And Garothan kind of likes Murderbot a little bit more after that. Well, it feels
Garothan's watching it, and then it's like, hey, Murderbot's like, hey, pay attention because people are coming. So
right. Yeah,
and then Garothan actually does kind of
like Murderbot
a little bit more after that.
And so it tells Mensa how it came back for her, and Mensa says that they questioned her about Murderbot, and it goes, I left, and she goes, yeah, I handled the situation very badly, I apologize. And Murderbot goes, okay, I was going to stand there and stare at a wall. And I was like, oh. And it said that like it's never been like, it never knows how to respond to apologies, even though like both Art and Taepan have apologized to it. And it admits that it knows that Mensa was worried because Pinley told her so. And she was like, yeah, I was afraid someone caught you. And so, like I said, they got as far as they could go. And then the security system comes down. I left out an entire part. And Murderbot ends up having to talk to Mensa for a little bit as it freaks out. And Mensa asks why Sanctuary Moon is Murderbot's favorite. And Murderbot's like, well, have you watched it? Thinking she's going to say no, so it can just like describe the plot of it. And she's like, yeah, I've watched it.
She's like, it's the first show that you've ever watched, though. I noticed that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that Mensa is looking into these things.
I know. And she goes like, it's a good story. I see why it's popular. I was curious about the part that you had talked to with Rathi, but like then I just kept watching it. And like Murderbot has to think about the fact of like, why do I like it so bad? And it says it's the first one I saw when I hacked my governor module and picked up the entertainment feed. It made me feel like a person.
And then Mensa's like, you are a person.
And like, it goes, not legally. And then she asks, like, why did it make you feel that way? And it goes, I don't know. It kept me company without, and she goes, without making you interact. And I'm like, I love this so much.
Honestly, I feel that way about so many TV shows.
I know. And it goes like, Murderbot says that it melted inside, kind of. And it goes, I hate when that happens. It makes me feel vulnerable. And Mensa says that she can protect Murderbot, and it goes, because you own me. And she goes, that's what you think, but like, that's not true. Like, I wish you'd trust me. I understand why you don't. And I'm like, gosh, I said I was like worried about how Mensa would react to Murderbot leaving, and she reacted perfectly.
Murderbot and Mensa are just goals. Oh,
I know. And that's when the system locks down, even though I said it happened twice before. My bad, guys. I'm not perfect. I am not Murderbot. You ruined everything. Stupid bitch. But Murderbot is trying to get Mensa to safety. It's freaking out. And it tells like the camps and the operations system to let Mensa go because they will kill her and they're not responding. And so Murderbot is like, if you let my client go through the gate, I'll stay here, please. They will kill her. And the locks let Mensa through. And Murderbot doesn't tell her that it's going to sacrifice itself. And Mensa's like, it's closed, sec unit. And she goes, I can't get through. I'll take another ship. Go to the shuttle and get out of here. And then it like shuts down the channel. And Murderbot goes, it sounds so self-sacrificing and dramatic telling it this way. And I guess it was, maybe.
What I was mostly thinking was that there wasn't going to be one dead sec unit.
There was going to be 4.
It's like, there was going to be 4.
I'm going to take down all of these. And it kind of talks about how smart Murderbot is with its fighting, because it can kind of see the weaknesses of the others, except there's one that's like barely engaging and just watching it.
Yeah.
And Murderbot is able to like put in different codes to slow systems down. But through it all, it doesn't realize that one of them is a combat sec unit, one of the most dangerous ones. And it realizes like one of them is trying to hack its code, and it's like, oh, that's who.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes, reaction number 2, flattering that they thought I was dangerous enough to pay for the contract on a combat sec unit.
Amazing.
And then it's like, I bet PortSec did not okay this, and they'd be pissed off. And then I was like, oh, I'm gonna die. And so it keeps trying to get the combat unit in. And it actually offers the combat unit free will to set it free.
Well, and then this is like a really scary moment where it's like you're gonna be free, like you can have all these things, and then it's like, I want to kill you.
It goes, you can do whatever you want. It goes, I want to kill you. And then it's like, but why? You don't even know me. And so it's like, it can kind of see like it maybe thought about thinking about it, but then it didn't.
Yeah. Then I was just like, no.
And Murderbot realizes it can't keep it up and it's about to die. And then it hears Mensa over the feed saying that Garathan's trying to open the barrier for it and to be at a certain place. And it's able to go through really quickly. And then they drop it, and Murderbot is saved from the combat sec unit and it like punches the opening of the barrier, and it's like, oh, that combat sec unit is not happy. And it's like, Murderbot, last book you were like, these don't have feelings. But anyway, they keep running, and Murderbot asks for some shrapnel to get out of its body, and one of them is like, don't worry, we'll go back to the med unit on the ship. And Murderbot's kind of like, it would be a cubicle for me. And it also doesn't trust cubicles. So it's like, it absolutely cannot wait. And so there's like a huge ship coming that has weapons on it to come save them. And so Murderbot like sends out like, please come get them. Bonded clients, go, go, go. And it gets like the ship to come over to them. But then they won't let Murderbot on because it is an armed sec unit, and sec units.
Well, they say something like, well, we're not allowed to let that weapon on or something like that.
Yes.
They're like, what's the weapon? They're like, oh, it's me.
Yes. And they have to pay more in order to get Murderbot onto the ship. And they do it happily when Murderbot's like, I could just kill them all. And Mensa's like, no, you can't. You're not doing that. We're just going to pay for you. And so Murderbot also talks about like how sec units aren't allowed to sit on things. And so it immediately goes into the company ship and it sits down on a comfy bench. It's like, I didn't really want to do it. I just could. And they also know, like, before they let Murderbot on, they're like, this is such an idiotic thing. This is unnecessary. It's not going to do anything. But Garathan sits down with Murderbot, or on the bench opposite. Rathi just plops down next to Murderbot. And so Murderbot can hear all of them like talking about it, and they're like, they really do look human. And Murderbot makes a gesture in that direction that's rated high on the obscenity scale, and Garathan chokes like because he's laughing at it.
Well, and is it Rathi that like earlier had like swore or something? And
yeah.
It says something like, oh, I like didn't recognize that language or something like this.
I love this so much. And so they like want Mensa to get a medical evaluation, and Mensa's like, no, like, and she's super pissed at Murderbot. She's like, you stay behind to get yourself killed. And Murderbot was like, well, I had to tell PortSec if they let you through to the shuttle, I'd stay behind. And she's like, is that why you stayed? And it's like, mostly I just wanted to win.
Yeah.
They're like, what do you mean win? And like, but you did come through once Garathan got the barrier open. And it's like, yeah, but like, I couldn't win against a combat sec unit. That's
like,
not
that one was gonna
thing.
like rip me to shreds.
Right? Like, so, they were like, well, we need to talk more about this. And then Murderbot realizes that there's going to be some hostile engagement coming through. And it realizes that it's oncoming, it's too late. And they realize that like, they have some kind of like system that's overriding all the comms. And Murderbot's able to save like its crew and a couple of the others, but it's too late for some. And it's really worried about like the ship overtaking them. And so Murderbot is like, well, Grey Chris is not going to win. And so it slips its way into the ship, just like Art had done with it once upon a time. And then it's like, yes, our processing capacity is much larger than mine. I'll address that issue when it comes up, which is real soon now. But anyways, it like talks with the bot pilot, or no, not the bot. Yeah, the bot pilot.
With
and
the
it's
bot
like,
pilot. And
yeah,
it's very worried and everything, which is kind of sad.
I know. And it talks about like the way the bot pilot can communicate. So it's trying to communicate with it at the same time as trying to figure out what's going on with the comms system. And they realize that there is an attacker in the system, which was a construct, and also like much better and much worse than one, because it probably didn't have a living body that it needed to be in, or an access point. They just shoved this construct into the system to overtake everything. And so Murderbot and the bot pilot work together to realize if they can get the attacker's code into one contained area, they can destroy it and regain control of everything.
Right.
And bot pilot is like, well, this is dangerous, because what does the attacker want to do? It wants to destroy everything. And Murderbot's like, well, there has to be a reason. There's no profit in killing them. And then it realizes that it must be going after the information that Murderbot has, because it thinks that Murderbot still has it in its possession. And so Murderbot like takes in some old data from Wilkin and Girth talking about things, but not really much of anything.
It's like they're not talking about much of anything,
but it makes it seem like it's something that the attacker wants. And it tells Mensa and Pinley to like wait for the system. And in this, it's like coming back to its body, or working with its body across to the ship. And it's kind of going everywhere all at once. Everything everywhere all at once. And it's able to convince the attacker to go into the shuttle system. And then it like shuts down the comm system there. It's like the bot pilot deletes its own comm system codes, because the attacker was able to take it because it hacked with old codes, just like Murderbot had been doing all this time. So they rebooted all the system codes, and Murderbot overloaded and fused its hardware. And then it tells Dr. Mensa and Pinley to shove out the panel and disengage the shuttle, so the attacker is stuck on that. And so they get over through that. They're in the clear. And Murderbot's like, I stayed until there was one explosive burst, and then I went back to my body and told them that we were clear. And then it's like, performative reliability at 45% and dropping, catastrophic failure. And
Murderbot crashes,
and you're like, oh my gosh, Murderbot. And
at that moment, I was like, no.
I know. I was just like, it has to be okay. There are more books, Hannah. So it comes back and it's like, my memory's in fragments. It can't seem to hold anything together. It hears people talking above it saying like, any changes? No. And it talks about how it wouldn't put them in the like the place that they usually put sec units, that they're in the medical facility. And Murderbot's like,
it's like, oh, I feel like a squishy bed. And
I know. And it like doesn't understand why there's catastrophic failure. It starts having partial identifications for a client. And it remembers art. It remembers the ship, the transports. And at one point,
Japan.
Yep, Rathi asks, how do you feel? And it says that it only knows Rathi as my human friend. And it goes, that's strange and unlikely, but the pre-catastrophic failure version of me seems sure about it. And I don't have anything else to go on. Fine. And it's like, do you know where you are? And it's like, no, I don't. So it remembers certain things, like it says like, I don't want to be a pet robot. And here's, I don't think anyone wants that. And I'm like, oh. And then it says, that was Grothan. I don't like him. I don't like you. I know.
You sounded like you thought that was funny. It's not funny.
And it goes, I'm going to mark your cognition level at 55%. Fuck you. Let's make it 60. And then it kind of remembers what happened. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's what I did. And it tells Dr. Mensa before it gets up and walks around that it's like, I don't want to be human. And Dr. Mensa's like, well, a lot of people aren't going to understand, but like, we think that like, because you look like you're human, the ultimate goal would be to become a human. And it goes, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Which, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It also realizes that it was trying to reconstruct its mind first, which says something before its body. And it like crumples to the floor. So it has to rebuild that. And so it realizes that they're at a station with a very old ship.
Mm-hmm.
And it realizes that it's at the Preservation Transit Station. And so they traveled there after it saved everyone, and it calls the ship shitty. And Arathi's like, it's not. It's just like this one became a station with our grandparents. And you find out that the preservation system was created by refugees who had been traveling for 200 years on transport boxes.
Which is fascinating. I really like that.
Really liked that like reveal. And it realizes like, oh yeah, there was a better than like equipment or deadly weapon if you like travel through like this. And but it notes that it still has to have an owner. And so it talks about how
the ship is shitty and smells like human socks. Also.
Yes. And it notes that it really doesn't like planets. The atmosphere and like how dirty it is gets to it. And they're like, okay, well then you don't have to go down there.
You can just stay on this. Right. That's fine.
And they are pretending that it is human because they don't, they know people won't understand.
Right.
And it asks to stay in a hotel with a big screen TV.
Yeah, it's like, can I have a really big display service? That probably. And
they also set up a little network so it can look all around. It's awesome. They're just so cute how much they love everyone. Arata and Overse come to see it. Arata like doesn't hug Murderbot, but is bouncing around and being like, we have a job for you to do. Like you can do it for like money if you want or exchange. And they're like, oh yeah, we like barter for different things. So, it's something you'll learn about later.
Well, and then somebody was like, is it Pinley? That's like,
we'll have to discuss it. You can't enter into contractual agreements until it completes its memory rebuild. And it's like, why? Because my owner says so. And it's like, no, because I'm your legal counsel.
I'm your lawyer.
I love it so much. And so they talk about how they give Murderbot Wilkin and Girth ID markers along with some other human ID markers because they want to let it know that it is welcome to leave at any time from a citizen's travel fund because they want Murderbot to understand that they're not some kind of prisoner or pet or whatever it is you think you are. And then Pidley stomps out. So like they see the news burst of all the various humans saying that the Bond company was still mad about the attack on the gunship and declared war on Grey Chris. And it goes, even in my current state, I knew it was not going to turn out for Grey Chris well. And so they all know that they are out of it now and they can tear each other apart. And so they're kind of rebuilding and they all ask what the sec unit thinks and it just gets up and goes back to its room. I also love that they know that Murderbot isn't comfortable hearing its name, so they never call it by that. Like,
yeah,
I really like that. And so it kind of walks around, it goes and it buys a ticket out of the area. And then it goes into the welcome center. It sits down for a 3-hour documentary movie about how the colony was created. And it realizes that no one's following it. So then instead of leaving, it lets the transport it bought a ticket on go away. And it goes up to Mensa's office building because it doesn't want to go to her house because it doesn't want to see all of her family. And so they all walk in and Mensa like sees Murderbot waiting in her office and Murderbot goes, it's me. And Mensa goes,
I see that.
I see that. And so Murderbot goes and waits for her out on her balcony while Mensa like talks to her family. And then Mensa's daughter walks out and it's like, hello. And Murderbot goes, I'm your mother's pet security consult. And she goes, or consultant. She goes, yeah, I know. I asked for your name, but she wouldn't tell me. And she said, you wouldn't. And Murderbot's like, you're right. And then the daughter goes, she also said you saved her from a bunch of corporate goons. And Murderbot goes, she didn't say goons.
I love that. Where she's like, she would never say goons.
But she's like, but you did save her. And it's like, yeah, I want to see. And it shows her. And it's like, your mother saved me too. She shot a sec unit with a sonic mining drill. And she goes, so you're a sec unit. Is that weird? And Murderbot goes, it's a complicated question with a simple answer. Yes. And so Mensa's like, I'm afraid you left. And it's like, I thought about it. And she's like, well, what are you going to do? And it's like, watch media. And she looks at it and she's like, come on, you haven't been doing that since you left. And it goes, I've watched a lot of media on the way to Milu. And she's like, well, Grothin showed me what you did. And like, you were helping these people. And it goes, I couldn't help them. They had contract labor agreement. Oh, which broke my heart.
I know.
And she's like, well, it was too late to hurt them then. And she's like, but you wanted to. And it goes, I'm programmed to help humans. And she goes, you're not programmed to watch media. She had a point.
So a lot of this that Murderbot's just like, oh yeah, I'm programmed to do this.
It's
like, you do a lot of things you're not programmed to do. You're not necessarily programmed to do all of these things.
It makes my heart very happy. And then it's noted that a nice little group of people who were helped by a consultant with a dubious international name, Consultant Rin, would like help from Rin's Murderbot. And Murderbot's like, they want to buy me.
Lander Independent.
Mm-hmm. And Mensa's like, no, they want to hire someone who may or may not be called Rin. And then I was like, they want to hire a sec unit? And they're like, well, they want to hire the person who saved them. So like, that's good enough for them. And Murderbot was like, that's exciting. And then she also says that Dr. Bartwaj wants to have Murderbot tell its story to like discuss its full account of the situation and how it feels and everything. But Mensa's like, you are welcome to do it. I totally understand why you wouldn't want to. And Murderbot's like, a documentary on the entertainment feed? And she's like, well, there's no rush on this. You get to decide what to do and where you're going next. And Murderbot's like, wow, I get to decide. Like, I still don't know what I want. And I think that's so beautiful. And that's the end.
Murderbot finally gets to make choices and has like the full definition of free will.
I know.
Love it so much. I just really love these books a lot, and I have yet to have read novellas that are like this powerful, I think.
I freaking love these books. Like they're so wonderful. They're
really just a breath of fresh air, honestly.
I know. This is so exciting.
So great. I love the characters. I just love all of it. And the message is like so great.
I know. And I cannot wait to talk next week about some of like the most fascinating things with Mensa and all of them. I just think it's going to be a wonderful discussion.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot more dynamics between characters to talk about in this novel that we got in like little glimpses of in All Systems Red, but now there's just so much more to talk about because things have developed and there's the history and it's
and it was so really hard in the first one because we were like, oh yeah, this person sort of has a character, but it doesn't make as much sense.
Yeah, now they're a little more fleshed out. And like I said, they have that history with each other. So it helps to kind of give us a little more background with everyone.
I know. I can't wait to talk more about them and talk about like their interactions because I love that Grothin is still on the team, even though it felt like he was relatively new from the other people. And that he's kind of like, I don't know. It's like at one point, Murderbot's like, Mensa looked at me the way she looks at Grothin and Pinley, like just exasperated.
So great.
And I'm like, oh, that's so adorable that like Dr. Mensa has to be like, these kids, like, come on. But yes, I cannot wait to discuss more with you. And you guys should join us next week to do a deep dive outside of the plot. The plots are such a good way to refresh us. But next week, we will talk about the themes and the characters of exit strategy. And we can't wait to talk more about it. So we look forward to that. And guys, like, I think we're going to reach out. And I think we're going to be doing an indie mission soon. Like we only
we have 2 more books left.
Yeah,
we're doing an indie mission, so
we'll have to get voting on that or figure out how we are going to be doing the next round of indie missions. So we are also I know this is only February 15th, but for my birthday month, Laura and I are doing an Indie Palooza, I'm going to call it. Laura and I will be reading indie books in the month of March. So make sure you guys have some indie books for you. We know that there are like lots of different things like Indie August and self-published September, of course, but this is just like a beginning of the year thing. So everyone pick up some indie books today as we dive into a couple indies in the month of March. So that's a couple of our little last minute things. And make sure you're following us on all the social platforms at OWWR Pod. That's Our Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and Hive. And you can also join us at our Patreon. So patreon.com/Our Pod. And make sure you're emailing us with any ideas you have for the podcast or things we should be reviewing. We're happy to hear from you. And that's at
book
our
suggestions as well. Like, always up for those.
We're always up for those. I will be posting, I promise. Laura has written some wonderful reviews that need to go up on the podcast. Hannah has had a crazy 2 weeks, but we will have those up soon. So make sure you're following along with those. And just, we're putting out tons of information out there for you guys. So join along, reach out. We'd love to hear from y'all. But until then, we will talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.